Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody out there in Facebook and Radio Land. My name is Eric Simpson, and with me is Jason King, one of our admins with the Southwest Florida Bourbon Society. Jason, how are you?
Hey, you guys, doing great. Good to be here. Thanks for having me, Eric. Thanks for inviting me to the inaugural maiden voyage of this Meet the Admin series. It's going to be a good time. I think we're going to have some fun today.
Hell yeah. So we were talking, and just from some scuttlebutt just around people in the group, they don't really know too much about us. They only know that we started this group and are picking picks. That's all they kind of know.
Yeah, right. There's some bottles we put out, and that's their acquaintance with us. So
as for every whiskey drinker that I have met that is deeply embedded into this hobby, everybody loves transparency. Everybody loves everything when it comes to where the whiskey came from, how it was made, all the nuts and bolts, all the nerdy things. So I decided to do that with our admin team. So I'm going to installing a small little series of Meet the Admins and see how the sausage is made within our brains and how we go about doing picks and what brought us into whiskey in general. So Jason, if you're ready.
Yeah, let's see how bad this first one goes and see if it doesn't continue, right?
Trial run. Here we go. So that being said, what got you into whiskey? What's your first kind of big whiskey experience? And even go back to the binging days.
Yeah, I'll tip my hat a bit to Scotch when it comes to my first whiskey experiences, because it started off. My wife was working in a restaurant down in Naples, and someone brought us a bottle of Talisker. And that was the first time we really had Scotch, and it was a nice kind of way to step into it. And then our next bottle we went out and got was a Balvenie. So we're kind of starting in those like upper areas where, the price points were a little bit higher than maybe a lot of people that start with,
like Sky, right?
Those are Talisker's Isle of Skye, yeah, and Balvenie's in the Highlands, but it's along the Spey. It's kind of like this weird hybrid because it I think technically it's a Speyside, but it drinks like a Highland in my opinion.
Right.
And they finish them. So, you've got tons of different flavors in there that aren't necessarily regionally specific. But right. Yeah, none of the smoky stuff a lot of people tend to have visceral reactions to. I didn't really get into that for quite a while. Stayed with nice, soft caramel, vanilla, simple, raisination, red fruits, like all that stuff.
Yep.
And the tell for me to let you know that that's where I started is every time I talk about a bourbon, I don't say proof, I talk about percentage, because that's the thing that Scotches do, where they don't write it on the bottle, they put the percentage.
Right.
So when it comes to me saying, oh, what's the percent? It's 58, and people are like, oh, it's 170 proof. It's like, it takes me like 20 minutes to figure out what that means in my head. So we started there, and we liked it well enough that we went over and took a trip to Scotland, did a distillery tours. So went to Glenfiddich, went to Macallan, went to Glenmorangie, went to Ballblair, tried to get to some over on the island of Skye. Couldn't really make that work in the scheduling with like the travel to there and back. But had a great time just kind of seeing how Scotch was done and really got a feel for that. And Scotch was getting more and more expensive, getting harder and harder to find. And like a lot of Scotch drinkers, you go, well, what's this stuff over here next to Scotch? So that's how we started in with bourbon. And then from there, it leads to rye, and then it leads to American single malts. And, sooner or later, you got a whole bookcase full of this stuff. So
what was you tipped on the Scotch journey? What was the bourbon, not necessarily your first bourbon, but what was the bourbon that said, I like this?
First bourbon that I think really made me go, ooh, that's interesting, was probably some of the High West rye offerings, which I wasn't really much of a rye fan at that point either, but I started to see a little bit more nuance in some of the bourbons that were, maybe I dismissed it earlier. Maybe I didn't really look for it as well as you can, because with Scotch, you got to hunt. Like Scotch just kind of smacks you in the face like a feather, and you got to sort of go, well, what was that? Was that a brown feather? Was that a white feather? You start really dissecting it, and bourbon's just like vanilla, caramel. So
I had this exact cover. We were doing that best of the blinds the other night, and I was someone was asking about palate stuff, and I said, if you taste vanilla, caramel, brown sugar, that's not wrong. I was like, I get nerdy with it because exactly what you just said. Like, I started in Scotch, and so that's how I pick my flavors out. So it's like, if I'm saying, this tastes like caramel, I'm in my head going, well, is it Milky Way? Does it taste like a Snickers bar? Like, does that nougat? Oh, it tastes like it's a zero. It's like, I kind of delineate and just kind of go all the way down to what exactly I'm actually tasting, you know.
Well, you'll do that with like, is it currants? Is it red fruits? Is it raisins? Like you start to get into that really specific, and to be honest, you know, the flavor wheels that they give you for tasting scotches and a lot of the things that people will sort of lead you down the path with, they dissect it out that specifically too. So it's kind of a neat university to get into whiskey, and training your palate is to start with these offerings, because like I said, you know, most of these things are coming in at 40%, 44%, 43%. You know, they tend to be you know, watered. They're lower proof. They're not barrel strength. They're not cask strength. There's no such thing as bottled in bond in Scotland. You know what I mean? You get a 50% Scotch, that sucker's been sitting on shelf for a while.
There's a whole nother section of flavors, even, you know, chemistry wise, that get brought out at that proof and that you're missing out on. you know?
Exactly.
It's elegant and nuanced, and you know, the worst master's keep of the Wild Turkey series that people don't like is my favorite. It was the very first one that came out. It was a 17-year-old. It was cask strength at 88.4 proof. And it was aged in the marketing story is oh, we were experimenting, and they it was actually put in a stone area at Castle and Key.
Okay.
It was in a brick warehouse, and so it just you know, went down and down and down. Well, it was supposed to be a Japanese release, but the Japanese whiskey market went bust, and so they just forgot about it. But it ended up being my favorite because it brought out just some really nuanced flavors of Wild Turkey that I'd never tasted before, and me being a Scotch drinker, I appreciated it.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I get the guys that don't appreciate Scotch, and it feels like sometimes people fight more than they need to about stuff like that, where it's like, well, I'm a Scotch drinker, I'm a bourbon drinker, I'm a rye drinker. Even it's just, I mean, it's all whiskey. Exactly. And there's been guys I've poured scotches for that when they drink it just absolutely hate it, like can't stand it, and you know, it's like, all right, I'm gonna try again in 6 months. I'm just not gonna tell you. I'm just gonna slide it across the table at you and see what happens.
I had a guy, really good friend of mine. He owned Old Soul Brewery back in the day, and he loved bourbon, loved rye, stuff like that. But he just, you know, he had this aversion to Scotch, and I said, why don't you like Scotch? And he goes, it just burns. And I was like, I don't know what Scotch you're drinking. I was like,
it's not designed to do that. It's not functioning as intended, if that's what's going on, right?
Unless you're drinking like cask strength Clan McGregor, you know, it's like, I don't think it's burning. Like, I don't know what you're drinking, but it's not Scotch.
That's funny.
But anywho, so now so some of the High West stuff got you in there, and you were big into that. You know, you're on your Scotch path. Now, time frame wise, what about what year is this?
Oh man, it's got to be probably 2015, 2014. I mean, okay. It wasn't too long ago. So I mean, to go from kind of like that more breaking into it to helping to admin a bourbon group, right? Like pretty quick ramp, you know. So
right, of course. Now you brought it up, segueing into the bourbon group. Now,
yeah,
you know, Big Rona was happening all at the time, so we all you know that song and dance. So here comes Southwest Florida Bourbon Society, a couple of randos coming together and drinking some whiskey. How did it segue into this big conglomerate that we have now?
Yeah. So the cool thing about it was, I don't know how many people know this, but I met Sean Farrell at a Total Wine. We were both there to pick up a bottle of Blanton's that we won, and we got to go in and buy it. And he's standing in line behind me. I don't know him from Adam, and he says, "Hey, what letter are you looking for the letters?" And I was like, "No, I'm not really doing the letter thing." And I was like, "Which ones do you need? You know, if you want this one, if I get one you need, you know, just swap them out. That's fine, whatever." And we came up bust. Neither of us had, you know, either the ones he was looking for. So it's like, all right, man, good meeting you. You know, when we go our own ways. Well, I go one way back to the bourbon aisle. He goes the other way back to the bourbon aisle. End up back there together, and just like, hey, you didn't leave, you know? Exactly. So we start talking.
Guy, you know?
Exactly. We start talking, and it's like, you know, the normal thing. You see somebody at the shelf at the liquor store, and it's like, oh, that one's good. Have you tried this? That one's overpriced. Don't drink that. You really ought to have a bottle of this, you know? And we're going through mentioning things, and we're all kind of like on the same thing. And he's like, well, I run a bourbon society and there's like, I don't know, like 5 guys in it right now. It was so small. He's like, I'll tell you what, here, we get on the phones and he's like, I'll add you and I'll make you an admin. So that way you can tell your friends and you can just add them as they come in. So that's literally how I became an admin of the Bourbon Society, was because it was so small that Sean was just like, hey, if you can get more people to join, then, here you go. Little did he know, that I've got a decent palate, right? So turns into a decent segue into how it got bigger and started blowing up was more just, talking to people at stores, going public. Really, it was very, very small group at first. The guys that would join, you kind of figure out who the guys were that were really into it, that were, going to stores on a regular basis, looking for specific things, and were fun to kind of trade notes with. John Dolafino was one of the first ones that came up for that, and I can remember I saw his name. I was like, "How do you say that?" And and then he messaged me a couple of times. We got to chat, and I told him where he could pick up a Knob Creek pick over at ABC, and then there you go, we're fast friends. And then he becomes an admin. And John's great friends with Bobby, and Bobby helped us with that first advent calendar, and he printed up all the books for that first advent calendar. And it was just like, well, we got to make this guy an admin, right? Right. Just kind of like turned into those things. But long before that, when we were still quite small, it was a relationship that we had with Fiddlesticks Liquor, where they gave us the opportunity to go up to Heaven Hill and pick out a barrel of Elijah Craig. It was that was the first one, the first one that we got, the 9-year-old.
That was the first pick. That was the first pick I got. I was in line for that one.
Yeah, it was awesome. And the 4-man crew that went to take this, it was myself, Sean, another guy, James, and Rob. And James and Rob are no longer active in the group. Rob hadn't even ever had a cask strength bourbon at the time that we went to take that pick. He never had Blanton's, never had barrel strength. Like, we took an absolute noob with us to this pick and had no idea till we got to the airport. And it turned out absolutely perfect, just because you had this variety of palates that existed on that pick.
That's and it was like, what, having a new person that's never had that before is almost good, because you just take away the preconceived notions of everything and you just got straight up, hey, this is really good, or hey, this doesn't taste good,
Yeah, and I tell you the truth, he and I were more aligned in our palates. I didn't pick this barrel. This was my number 2. Mm-hmm. We tried 3, and number 3 we were like, okay, that one's out. And then we went back and forth between 1 and 2, and we're trying to dilute it down to what they were going to give us with the 94, because you're trying it in the barrel, but you're delivering it watered, and we're kicking ourselves for not bringing a hydrometer, and we're pontificating and going back and forth. And it just turned into the fact that, what, if we watered down the one that I thought was better, and I agreed with this by the time we left, it was going to taste just like the regular Elijah Craig that you buy off the shelf today. Mm-hmm. This one was special. This one was a little bit darker, a little more brown sugar instead of caramel. It just drank different.
It reminded me of a lot of, because my favorite whiskey used to be the original Elijah Craig, the 12-year.
Yeah.
The Big Red 12. I love that stuff. That was just good damn whiskey. And that's what we're like. The stuff you buy now doesn't taste anywhere near it.
It's not the same. It's really not.
That pick reminded me so much of it. And I was like, that was a good, solid, just, I don't know how to describe it. It was just older whiskey. I know it was 9 years old, but it just tasted, it hit above its mark.
Yeah, and it wasn't the oldest one they gave us to pick from. They gave us an 11-year, they gave us a 9-year, and the other one I believe was an 8-year. So it was kind of in the middle. Mm-hmm. And, we're thinking to ourselves, like, we have the strategy. We're in the car, we're driving to Heaven Hill, and we're like, okay, do we want to pick the one that's the highest proof or the one that's the lowest proof? We're like, well, if you pick the one that's the lowest proof, they're going to add least amount of water. And we're doing all this math, and we got in there. It was just like, we're not telling you anything. You don't know how old it is. You don't know. Just here's 3 barrels. Pick the one that you like. And it turned out to be a great way to do it. I'm so happy we did it that way. And you'll find a lot of the guys that send samples out to the stores, like for you to do the picks more locally, do the same thing. They'll run you through it blind. Maybe they'll drink you through in the pathway that they think you should drink through it, to kind of make sure you don't blow your palate out on something that they know is a little hotter or something they know is a little bit more dark. But what a great way to do it. It's just know nothing and just let your tongue make the choice.
They that last the first Russell's pick that we did, when we went through the samples on that one, because Russell's has a really low or a lower barrel entry proof than most.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they actually go in at 115.
Oh.
Which that's kind of where they get kind of the best of their concentration and flavor.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lower proof. or lower barrel entry proof, and it works, but they've gradually increased over the years, but they've kind of stuck solid at that 115 for a while. But so we're talking over the Russells. So most of the stuff that's coming out of the cast strength is 115, 116, 117, or roughly around there.
Wow.
One of the samples we got was like 124, and you just don't see that.
Yeah.
That was dead last for us. It did not.
It was the last, really.
Did not, like, when we all was Sean, John, myself, Dave. Yeah, we all tasted and didn't say a word to each other, and just wrote everything down, and then we just all said, all right, we're gonna eliminate one now. Let's eliminate one, and we all picked that high proof one.
That's a great way to do it, isn't it? To pick your bottom and dump the bottom first.
Yeah, I was like, okay, let's all raise the one that we didn't like. And
yep.
I was like, there was something about it. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it was. It was just too. It wasn't Russell's.
Yeah. Well, this was my first Russell's pick that I ever bought.
Oh, really?
What is this? Yeah, had no knowledge of the history of it. Like I said, not a long time bourbon drinker.
Right.
And you find the ones that you like, and you kind of stick with some of them. It's hard to branch out sometimes. In fact, that's been one of the best things about the group, is that people approaching Dave or going out and courting these distilleries and saying, hey, we're a group, we'd like to run a pick. I mean, my palate has expanded, and I've got a buddy that I usually bring one of the picks to, and he lives in Arizona. And he said to me one day, he's like, man, every time you come over here, you bring me a different bottle. And my cabinet's just full of the weirdest stuff. Like, it's stuff I never would have bought, but it's stuff you've introduced me to. And I was like, well, that's kind of the larger story of the group. I mean,
yeah,
I wasn't drinking Blue Note and Traverse City and Wilderness Trail or Chattanooga. Who drinks Chattanooga, right? I mean, but this stuff's great.
Right. And I have found more Scotch drinkers like regular Chattanooga than anything. I'm picking up on who drinks what and who I know is Scotch drinkers. I keep a little mental note.
Right, and that's not a slight against Chattanooga, because they make a great product, but someone literally has to put it in your hand sometimes for you to go, oh, this is good, and that's what happened. And in our case, it was the master distiller that put it in our hand.
There you go.
Yeah, so if he watches this video, it worked.
So like Sean was over here a couple of days ago, and it's the first time he had been over here. He saw all of my bottles, and he was like, I didn't know you had this many damn bottles. I was like, I bought a fuck ton of stuff when I started getting into bourbon. I realized I didn't like half of them, but I had to. I was one of like the people that I make fun of, the taters, and I was like full tater like right when I started, and I got into bourbon probably about 2012, 2011.
Okay.
And I just was
so still relatively accessible, still relatively affordable. I mean, back then you were finding Pappies on the shelf, right?
Yeah. They were sitting there at like $70, but at the time I was like junior in college, so like I didn't have like $70 Pappy money, but to me, and just perception of how I was introduced to bourbon. See, I was started on Scotch when I was in high school. My buddy's dad was a big Scotch drinker, and my first Scotch was a Lafroig 18.
Oh dear.
First one I ever had.
And you went back.
Yeah.
Man, that's the story right there. That's the headline. Quit talking to me.
Yeah. Lafroig 18 was my and I still have it. I kept the bottle. But I ended up going into bourbon just because I was like, I would like to have a glass. And I'm from Georgia, and I went to an agricultural college, so like bourbon was the drink. It was like I was a bougie snob because I drink Scotch, but they pour makers or whatever. But
who's this guy in the seersucker?
Exactly. What I would see people drinking, and they say, "Oh, I went and got a nice bottle of bourbon." And they'd be like, "Oh, okay, what it was? It was either Knob Creek or Woodford." Huh. And I always thought that was the expensive bourbon.
Yeah.
And clever marketing on Woodford's part. They're a part of the Derby. That's the kind of their big thing. And they're at that. They're not at that non-accessible price, but they're at that slightly above poverty line.
Yeah, that's a shelf I frequent.
Yeah.
even today.
It's like you can always sit on the shelf and you're like, oh, that's not bad. That's like $35-$40. That's it's decent.
And I don't feel bad when I finish a bottle of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I got 10. There's bottles sitting up here that when these things are gone, I'm gonna be really upset. But you throw a empty Wild Turkey 101 in the trash can, you're like, woo,
Exactly.
got another one.
Exactly. So I always thought that Knob Creek and Woodford were the expensive bourbons, and so that was kind of like high stepping when you got there. But the next one under that was Makers, and
Okay.
Makers to this day I think has had the best marketing strategy I've ever heard in my entire life. There has not been a Maker's Mark bottle that has ever been age stated. Ever. They're all about 5, 6. Some of the picks can get a little older, but not much. They're all about that 4 to 5 year old range. It's a wheated bourbon, and they've all been they're all around 90 proof, except for some of the later stuff. But they've all kind of hovered around that. That they have a low barrel entry proof too. Yeah, they're at 110.
Yeah, and I never played with most of those. I wasn't going to the bourbon shelf looking for those things, because coming from scotches, one of my favorite things about scotch, I've eventually learned there's cask strength scotches out there that can be in higher proofs.
Right.
And so I kind of happened upon that naturally by seeking those out. Someone put a bottle of Glenlivet Nadura in my hand, and they had 3 different varieties of that. They got the sherry, the peated, which isn't actually peated. It's just like stored in a peated cask.
Right.
And then they had this one that's like just neutral. It's like not finished or anything. And I found some of those on Ludwig's Fine Wines, and they were like $50 or $60 a piece. And I ordered about 6 of each of them, and just like drank on those for years, just years. And I was like, all right, I'm a cask strength drinker now. And so what I've loved, like absolutely loved about the picks that we've got here, and I'm looking at a bunch of them right now, is that so many of them have been able to be bottled at the cask strength full proof. Like, if you're not into that, you want to throw an ice cube in it, if you want to put a little water on it, like the versatility of a cask strength offering to hit a wider audience is just incredible. Because sometimes you want a cold drink, sometimes you want something that'll hold an ice cube, right? If I put an ice cube into Elijah Craig 94, no offense to anybody that does that, but I'm not going to taste it.
Right. It's going to taste like cold with a little bit of burn.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, there's the 2 things they say that mute the flavor of whiskey, and that's temperature and water. And you just described ice, man. That's ice. So,
yeah. 280. I just got done taking a science, and that is ice.
That is ice. That's right. We remembered the recipe. That's why we still have a hockey team.
Oh my lord. So you said you were talking about cask strength scotches. I was laughing because I have last time.
You got the whole panel, right?
Well, last time I went to Yogi, he still had just like old stuff that nobody ever bought up there. And see, he still has the 16-year age-dated Glenlivet.
The ones that say 16 on them?
Yeah, still has them.
I had to go to Scotland to get those.
$70.
$70?
Yeah, and they're like 95 at Total Wine, non-age stated.
Right. Because they still taste just as good. I bet it's the same stuff, but they just don't have the 16 on the side.
Right. Yeah. This is a 16-year-old, and he still had some Macallan Classic cuts from I think like 2015 and 2017 at $80.
Man, and those are bourbon drinker scotches, I think. Like
Macallan is
Aberlour,
the bourbon drinkers. It's the bourbon drinkers scotch.
Yeah, but I mean, even those higher proof ones too. Like the people that I'm thinking of that I've poured scotches for, they're bourbon guys that have been like, I don't really know if I like this stuff. Those are the ones where they're like, well, I could see myself drinking this because it doesn't taste like smoke or it doesn't taste like a Band-Aid.
Right. I keep those around, like those. Was it the Glenlivet rum finish? Or is the Caribbean cask? There's a cognac finish one that they got. Even the 15-year French Oak Reserve, like all of those are for bourbon drinkers. Like, they're good whiskeys in their own right. Like, I like them, but those aren't what I typically gravitate towards.
Mm-mm.
But I've got buddies that won't touch what I touch, but they'll like that.
Yeah, anyway. That's good to have. It's very good to have. Yeah.
So segueing into the bourbon side. What was the cask strength bourbon that got you?
Stag Junior, okay. I think was the one that got me the worst because I got onto Stag Junior when it was around batch 8, and there was a shop over by. I was living over in Bellaterra and Estero, and there was a liquor store next to the Publix. I think it's an ABC or A to Z, not ABC, A to Z. And I walked in there one day and I saw just boxes of Stag Junior sitting on the floor, and I was like, well, Stag Junior, it's okay. I know Stag is good. And it's the same font, right? So I was like, I'll grab one of those. So I took one of those things home. $60, right? You know, take it home, tried it, like, ooh. Took it over to my buddy's house, like, here, try this. I think this might be good. He's like, yeah, I think that is good. Went back, bought 3 or 4 more, you know, waited a while, went back, bought another 6. Like they were just sitting there.
Right.
And for me looking at them thinking, oh, they're just, you know, they're riding on the Stag name, you know, it's just a rebottling. There goes Buffalo Trace trying to make some money, you know. But it was good.
God forbid these companies try to make profits. Like
I know.
I forgot we live in capitalistic society.
The last thing I want them to do is to stay in business and keep making this stuff.
Yeah,
you know, they should stop.
If they weren't doing that, they'd be behind
right.
the whole thing, you know.
But then, like from there, the Elijah Craig was also something that I could get a hold of every now and again.
Yep.
So these Elijah Craig barrel proofs were, and that was before they were doing picks. You know, the pick.
They were still the squat bottles.
No, they're doing the 12 years like this.
Yep.
Like and they just say barrel proof. They don't say private barrel. But I mean, dude, I got a shelf of those in there just because they're also, you know, distinctly different. You know, the B19 was what I thought that our pick tasted the most like when I went back through and was tasting like some of the cherry and the dark. And the fact that I had a couple of these cats laying around where I was like, oh, let me taste through some of this stuff and see if I can remember or pick out what I like the best.
Right.
That was good. And then a buddy of mine brought me back a Maker's Mark, a private selection from the distillery that was picked by Bill Samuels. And, you know, you got the staves on the front here now. They used to put it on the back with little check boxes.
Yeah,
and, you know, yeah, and everyone gets all, okay, I'm going to be a chef. I'm going to put 1 in here and 2 in here and 3 in here and 1 in here. And they do that. And Bill Samuels, he put all 10 Maker's Mark 46 staves in there. He was like, 1 flavor, 1 thing. They're all going in there. It's the best one I've ever had. There are people who spend years of their life to become a blender in Scotland for a reason. Yeah.
You know.
and
talent to blend and mix flavors.
and I love this bottle and I love what it does, and it's one of those ones where I open it and it disappears too fast and it changes as I drink it. Like it'll change in 45 minutes while I'm sipping on it, and I love that it does that. But it was like I couldn't believe that Bill Samuels was like, when I looked at it I was like, is he just lazy? I was like, no, I think he knows what he's doing. Like I think he might be smart.
God forbid these old master distillers liked good whiskey, you know.
I've
always said that, and I've you know, over the years of being a whiskey drinker, I've found out that when people refer to something as rot gut, they're referring to blended whiskey, and that's the stuff just that says just Kentucky bourbon and then it says blended with grain spirit.
Yeah,
that's the rot gut.
That's the rough stuff.
Because you can go, like, us whiskey nerds can go and just say, oh, we're not going to buy Jim Beam White Label, we're not going to buy Evan Williams Black Label, whatever, because it's either, you know, too low a proof, whatever. But that's what we're going to say. Or
benchmark or whatever it is.
Whatever. But we will never say that it tastes like shit whiskey.
I Benchmark's one of my favorite mixers.
It does not taste like shit whiskey because
it doesn't.
Good. It was made by good distillers. It was made by, you know, it is just watered down. That's it.
Yeah. it still has the DNA in there that's decent. Right, I 100% agree with what you're saying. That makes a ton of sense. And for the longest time I was always in trying to find those low shelf bottles that would punch above their weight class, you know?
Yep.
And when you find one, you do one of two things. You either tell everyone or you tell no one. It's one of the two. More times than not, it's no one.
The one they've changed it now. God, my internet's slow. They've changed it now, but the one that I used to go to all the time to was Evan Williams 1783. And I only had heard, and of course this is all just rumor mill, but I had heard that it was just full of the rejects of the Elijah Craig 18-year single barrels, all
yeah, you hear those rumors, don't you?
Yeah. Well, when you actually taste it, like it's oaky. Like it doesn't taste young at all. Like it is just oaky, but it's just about 86 proof. But it's perfect. It's like it was like $15 at the time. But it just tasted like older whiskey, but not corn. Like you didn't get that young harshness out of it. It was just really old, and I was like, I don't know, there might be some merit to this,
All right, so you've teased it out of me. I'm gonna tell you the most embarrassing whiskey I loved, and it was when I was in college, and I would go visit my buddy Danny over in Orlando, and there was this little shop over by UCF that used to sell these little boot bottles of CC Citrus. It was Canadian Club.
Okay.
And it had like lemon in it. And it was the whiskey. Yeah, it was the whiskey that 40%, like it may have been 35, who knows, right? But it was the whiskey that I could just open the bottle and I could drink it, because that's what you do when you're in college.
Yes.
And it was in a small enough bottle that I didn't lose myself if I finished it. So like this, I was like, this is a perfect whiskey. And they quit making it. And I'll tell you what, you Google CC Citrus and you go look for it, and there are cats selling it on the internet for hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And it's garbage. It's garbage. But it's just like, I think I still love it. I think if somebody slid me a glass of that, if I saw it on a bar somewhere and I was, in the middle of nowhere, and I was just like, oh, is that CC Citrus? Sir, do you think I could have a glass of that?
That's like, it's like the Wild Turkey honey liqueur. They made that in the 70s.
Yeah.
Like now it's called American Spirit. But it's like they made people were paying just $400, $500 for a bottle of that stuff because it has dusty wild turkey in it mixed with honey.
Because it went away. So
oh my God.
It brings it up. Well, I guess what I want to do, I brought out a bunch of my bottles here because I knew this was happening.
Yep.
And what I kind of wanted to do, because it is a meet the admin kind of thing, and we've talked a bit through some stuff, but I think one of the more fascinating ways to get to meet your admin team is, number one, to understand the philosophy of why we do picks and what we're trying to achieve. And number one is, and this is, I completely stole this from Brock Smith up at Eskimo Brothers, because he's the one that said it to me, and I was like, ooh, that sounds smart. I'm gonna start saying it enough, maybe people think I said it. But he said he went to do picks, and every time he goes, the mission is to bring something to the market that doesn't already exist.
Right.
That's number one. But number two, it also has to be good. And I was like, man, that's exactly it. Is when we were sitting down doing the Chattanooga pick, when he shared that little pearl of wisdom with me. And I was like, that's pretty much what we've been doing. And without even thinking about it, that's what the first pick, the Elijah Craig 9-year, was all about.
Right.
So of the picks that exist that we have done, I kind of got them segregated here for you, so you can sort of see the ones that I've been responsible for, and those are the ones that are all over here on this shelf. And there's a couple missing here, and I just haven't got them yet. But the ones that are missing are the Blue Note and the Smooth Ambler that most recently came out.
Yep.
So I was on those pick teams, but you can see going back, and you don't belong here. You get over there where you belong. All right. So you got the original Elijah Craig. So if you like that flavor profile, that resonated with me as well. That was one that I said, yes, let's bring that home.
Yep.
The Heaven's Door cast strength, the first one we did for the Happy Place. This one, I'm a big MGP fan. I think MGP does what they're doing because they do it really, really well. That's why they've been doing it so long.
Yep. And
this is cask strength MGP, so it was like, man, that's good. Price point was right. Just solid bourbon. It's not my favorite bourbon, but gee golly, do I like it. Now, when it comes to these other ones, these are like, holy cow. And I'll save that one for last because that one's probably my favorite. But the Wheat Old Elk, this one right here, like we walked in to do this tasting. You were there.
I was there.
And they rolled out like 4 samples of their wheated bourbon. There was a couple of them that they had. And we didn't know that the wheat was going to be an option. I had bought a couple of these bottles of just the wheat whiskey, which is a different animal because it's the 95% wheat mash bill with a little bit of malt on the back end.
Right.
And they're cask strength. And I've been picking these things up for a little while before this thing came down. And so Noel comes in, he's a rep from Old Elk, and he sits down and he's like, well, I got I got a wheat for you guys to try. And I was like, can we go ahead and pick that? Like, is it all right to pick that? We hadn't tasted any of them. And so we went through and we tasted the whole thing and came back to that wheat. And it was just like, my goodness, that thing is a firecracker. That was just, if you haven't picked up a bottle of this, or you haven't had a chance to try it, get with somebody who's got it. I think this thing is just insanely good.
It was good.
Love it. Most recently, this one, super proud of the Traverse City pick that came through. And what's funny is that, you know, as we've gone through and picked out some of these things, we've tried to be conscious that we're a business partner with the stores that take us on. And you can sell, you know, a $35 bottle of liquor any day of the week. But when you start coming around and saying, hey, I want you to go try and sell me something that's like, you know, $80, something that's kind of like creeping up into that price range, we start to ask ourselves, it is. And it's like, you know, I want to be sensitive to the business owner, and I want to be sensitive to the member that's going to come through and buy these things and try them, you know, and trying to find that sweet spot where it makes good business sense for the person that's partnered with us. Because at the end of the day, they're the one that writes a check and sends us up to go pick something out, right?
Yep.
And you really want to make sure you're not leaving that guy high and dry. And I'm really proud of the way that the society has supported the picks. And I'm really proud of the way that Dave has even wanted some of those picks to kind of hang out on the shelf, so that when someone new comes into the store, he can be like, well, I've got picks over there.
Right.
And he said that about the Wilderness Trail, because this was one of our slower sellers, you know, and this is, you know, a big, strong, weedy bourbon as well. And for the life of me, the two Starlights, it was like the two Starlights didn't sell for the longest, and then as soon as they sold out, everybody wanted them.
That blew my mind on them not selling. I thought those would be one of the first ones that just got flown off.
And now they're kind of coming into their own, and you see that when Starlights exist on the shelf in places, and Brock Smith, I'm gonna keep talking about Brock Smith because the guy is fantastic at what he does, and we've learned tons from him, and you know, credit where it's due. The man's a trailblazer in my opinion, because he's going to places like this where we first pulled these things off the shelves and we're like, oh, that might be a distillery worth paying attention to, right? Mm-hmm. And we've got more Starlights coming. Those two picks have been completed, so we're going to have another crack at those. But I mean, you're looking at a cask strength, superbly finished, from a winery that's associated with, I mean, it's grained glass.
Right.
You know, the only other thing that I have in my collection that's even remotely similar to this is Redwood Empire Haystack Needle. And I paid $150 for the bottle, and I didn't pay $150 for one of these. You know what I mean? And these are great. They're great.
We did a podcast with Christian. We did a podcast with Christian 2 years ago. Yeah, about 2 years ago, just going over it because my buddy Eric, his dad actually lives like right across from Starlight.
Yeah, I've not been myself. That's one of the ones I would love to go to. And just what they're doing and the variety of things that they have is super impressive. And they're bottling at fairly high proofs, you know, definitely great stuff. But this little guy right here is probably my favorite. This is, and this was just kind of like, you know, Sean called me on a whim. Is this your favorite as well? You know, for those of you that know, I've moved since out here to Arizona. I don't even live in Florida anymore. That's why there's still sunlight coming through my windows and it's dark where you are. But I took this down to my local. There's a shop that runs their bourbon society here in Arizona, and I took about 6 of our bottles down there, and I walked them through some of the stuff, because at the end of the day, I'm like, hey man, I got a palate, I know what I'm doing. You know, let me help you. You got a society, you want some help? Let me see what I can. You know, let me play, because it's fun, right?
Right.
They drank through several of our picks. They poured this, and they were like, whoa, like that's incredible. And I think this thing tastes like the chocolate eraser from the Scholastic Book Fair. Like, it's just got that, and that's why we put the sticker "I'm in love with the cocoa" on it, because it's got corn and cocoa and it's in there. And this thing is like 3 different kinds of malt. There's a chocolate malt, there's a roasted caramel malt. It's just a malt education, and maybe that's hitting me in like the Scotch spot as well, because it's so malty. But oh my goodness, this bottle, I just, and it was the first time I sat down at the table with Brock and Derek from Manatee, and we sat down and we talked about whiskey, we talked about rum, and it just, friendships were forged, right? It was just such a great pick experience. And then when the thing shows up in the store, we cracked it, we were like, oh my stars, this thing's amazing. It's amazing. Right. So Yeah, that's a never again. But I did hear that they have altered their single barrel program now, where these are going to be publicly released, because this is just one of the 4 components that they offer in
Right.
the bottled in bond.
Right.
And so the Chattanooga model, I had heard at one point going forward, was going to be to release those 4 components individually, sort of like a deconstructed bottled in bond, so that everyone could experience it. So this may be a product that you can get on the market again soon. I don't know if it's going to be a cask strength or not. They may bring it down to their bottled in bond as well, but who knows? But yeah, so in a nutshell, like this is my palate. So like if I pick something, these are the things I'm going for, and these are the things that I just absolutely love. And I love, sadly, I hate to say it, some of the other picks that I wasn't on, I like a little more than some ones I picked too. I mean, this Yellowstone was a monster. That's a
good one.
And also, this is the first Yellowstone I ever bought. So talk about starting at the top, right? And
yeah, we were at that Yellowstone dinner at that guy's house, the doctor's house.
Yeah. I think that's where you and I met for the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
Over Dr. Lentz's house.
Yep.
And Steve Beam was there.
Yep, exactly.
And we were all wearing big boy clothes. We got our shirts tucked in.
Oh yeah, a little fancy, pinkies out and everything.
Yep.
I had when I was trying some of the product, and it was not hitting me at all. I was not a huge fan of Yellowstone. I was not gonna obviously be there and just disrespect the master distiller, because I just
right.
It just wasn't hitting me, and I was like, I'm
probably
probably not gonna buy this. However, that pick was good.
Yeah.
That pick was damn good.
Yeah, I remember because they let us bring a little bit home from the tasting, and Matt Haynes was hanging on to it in his lair. And I went into Matt Haynes' lair, and he pulled out this little tiny unlabeled bottle of, God knows what.
Straight.
And he's like, here, try this, right? And it was that, and I was just like, whoa. And we had, 3 or 4 bottles that were coming from that trip, because they did Yellowstone at the same time they did. Gosh, what else did they do? They did the other Elijah Craig at that point?
They did Bullet too.
Did Bullet, and holy cow, when that thing came back,
that shit is up in my top.
First Bullet I ever bought as well. I had never bought a bottle of Bullet until this thing came out. And Sean had a different pick that we tried while we were sitting at the pick for it was at Lumberax. We were picking something else. It might have been for the Heaven's Door pick that we did. But he pulled out another group's pick of this, and I was like, it's okay, it's all right. And then this thing showed up at Fiddlesticks, and I tried it, and I was like, they're on the map. This is my wife's favorite as well. I have to hide these from my wife, because this is like her go-to. And boy, when these run out, she's gonna be very upset. I'm gonna have to teach her how to start drinking rye or something. But yeah, great pick. So it's not to say that, I feel like I've brought the best back to the group. I feel like I brought some great stuff back that I'm proud of, but I'm also really proud of the combination of palates that exist among the admin team. And I know this is something that we regularly talk about as a group, is that it's nice that we're not all one note.
Yeah.
Good. Oh my goodness, we fight. Oh, do we fight when it comes to these picks? Like,
I want a PSA out there right now. Jason and I are friends.
We fight over stickers. We fight over picks. We fight over price points. We fight over samples.
Sean and I were talking privately, and I don't think I've ever told you this, but Sean and I were talking privately, and this is, I guess it was kind of mid stages, but it was just like he goes, I think you and Jason are.
He says the same thing to me. So you guys are the same person.
Y'all are the very same person.
Same person. That's the problem with you two, is you're the same person. It's like you're the same end of the magnet. It's like, thanks, Dad. Thanks, Dad. Yeah, that's why we fight, because we both like scotch and we can't get along because we like the same things and we're boys and we don't know how to talk about our feelings.
Exactly. So be a PSA. We are friends.
Yeah. I've since become more sensitive, and I've accepted.
I took my training,
Yeah, absolutely. And same to you. It's been a fun ride. I'm glad you're part of the group, because you bring that same Scotch palate, and I know John's got a Scotch palate too, or Alvin, as you guys may see him online. We're the 3 Scotch drinkers in the group. Is there anybody else that does it?
Not really. I think Corey Cunningham dabbles more than the other ones.
I gave Corey Corey Todd some scotches to try on too. I sent him down a path, and he liked it. He came over to the house and I drank him through a couple, and he drank me through some elite stuff that I'd never had. He brought me a Starlight Sauvignon Blanc finish or Cabernet finish, and he fully shoved me down the Starlight path. So I shoved him down the Japanese whiskey path. I think I poured him Yamazaki 12. I poured him Nika from the barrel.
That's a whole another argument on another day.
It is, yeah. And Nika from the barrel, great bourbon drinker scotch as well, or whiskey, because it's not a scotch, but you know.
But it is.
Yeah, and those rules are fun too. It's like, well, that's not a bourbon, that's a whiskey, and that's a single malt. It's whiskey.
Do you like it? Does it taste good?
Yeah. It's whiskey. So.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
I have one more question I was going to ask you. So you said you were a big MGP person.
Mm-hmm.
MGP does not hit me exactly like it does with most people. I get a artificial sweetness with MGP that I just can't get out of. However, just kind of in my whiskey journey, I have learned to appreciate what things are for what they are.
Mm-hmm.
When I tried because Sean was pushing me on our Smooth Ambler, and I tried it, and he's like, "Well, what do you think?" And I was like,
I didn't like it at first when I tasted it at the pick. I kind of was on the fence about, like, should we even get this? Like, should we tell them no, take them all back, we don't want anything?
Right. So I had tried it, and what I initially thought of it was it's what the Nulu pick should have been.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I hear you.
It was like 6-year-old cask strength MGP, and it was priced at $50. That was perfect.
Yeah. Who's not gonna drink this?
Yeah, like it is what it is.
It's the same story as this.
It drinks what it is. Like this is exactly what this is. And I was like, I don't hate this. It's just it's not my thing. But I don't hate it. It's not revolting.
No.
It's what it should have been. Those Nulu, like I've seen Nulus and I've seen every damn cask strength MGP out there, and they're all 6-7 years old, and they're all about $70-$80. When that came out and it was $50, I was like, this is it. Like, this is what you should be getting.
Yeah. Finally the price point's accurate.
If you want some cask strength MGP, this is what you need to buy.
But the problem is that MGP is supplying so many people that you can be drinking MGP and not even knowing it. And I guess that's kind of what happened with me with High West. Was my absolute favorite bottle of High West is a High West light whiskey that I got at the distillery. It was a 14-year, and it was only at 100 proof. So they watered it down to that, and there's a whole story on the back about what light whiskey is, and it's about they found these barrels that were sitting somewhere. And it's like, you guys haven't been open long enough to find barrels. You bought some older stuff from your source, and you're marketing it, and it's great. It's really, really great. So don't slap a Utah storyline on it. Just sell it to me.
Grandpa Pappy Daniels from 1810 had this recipe.
That's right. And what's funny is you'll find that, like, they do actually make their own stuff. So I've got the Valley Tan, which is like the old recipe that who's the Mormon guy, the big leader of the Mormons?
Joseph Smith?
No, it's the one before him.
Oh shit!
Brigham Young.
Yes.
The Valley Tan that High West puts out is the recipe that Brigham Young used in the distillation process before he made the bourbon illegal for the Mormons to consume. So it's like legalism in a bottle, and High West was like, let's wake this up and let's start selling it to people.
So reading through the tea leaves here, Brigham Young got really drunk on his own light whiskey and then created the golden tablets.
That was the Angel Moroni said something about that, I think, and then the Native Americans had a part in it as well. It's a very foggy history how they got from making bourbon and selling it to not making bourbon. And I love High West being a company that's firmly rooted in Park City in Utah, just kind of poking that, and being like, hey, we're going to release this on a semi-regular basis and kind of throw it in your face, and by no means do I mean to poke fun at religion. or to single one out, but I mean, I'm using the word legalism, so clearly I subscribe to some form of religion because I know what that word means.
There you go.
But it was, and it's MGP stuff. It's MGP stuff. You know, they gave the recipe to MGP, said, here, make it.
Hey, for a hot minute, a lot of Bullet was a mixture of Four Roses and MGP.
And so it's everywhere. and then now we've got Old Elk, which is, you know, out of Colorado, but it's Greg Metz. So it's the guy that when MGP was in its heyday. So it's like, finally something that's not MGP. It's the same guy.
and Old Elk's like regular stuff is very malted. Like it's a very scotchy style bourbon for someone that's never dived into it. Because that's how I got introduced to it. My Scotch buddy that got me started was like, hey, I have this bottle of Old Elk. You should try it.
You're gonna love it.
Exactly.
You're a Scotch. You're gonna love this.
That's exactly. I was like, hey, it's got a damn antler on the top.
That's funny. It is kind of funny.
So before we segue out here, a couple of quick questions, because our philosophies, I guess we could say, are fairly similar on how we're looking for flavors and what we like, and so on and so forth. So I know where I stand on kind of my sweet spot in proof on a whiskey, on kind of what I like. I also know what I tend to like more on certain whiskeys. So I have always found a majority of the time that a Scotch drinker who went into bourbon likes finished bourbons more than a bourbon purist, and usually likes the 100-ish proof.
That used to describe me.
Okay.
I'll say that's probably a good spot. At one point in time, I was like, Bottled in Bond is like the perfect. It's exactly where everything should be. Is at Bottled in Bond is that 100 proof, 50%. I mean, you get a decent yield out of the barrel, a little bit of water, not too much. Like the flavors are coming out.
Yep.
And I mean, that Remus Repeal that comes in at 100, perfect example. You know, or Very Old Barton. If you can find a bottle of a Very Old Barton bonded, that's the white label.
Yep.
So much better than the green label, red label. So much better. What was the other? There's another one that I used to just love because it was Henry McKenna.
Yep.
Henry McKenna 10-year. First time I bought a bottle of Henry McKenna 10-year, I was like, why isn't everybody 100 proof? Why should all be 100 proof? You know? But then that Obtainium light whiskey came out, you know, and it's 14 years and it's like 90%. It might even be 120%. Like that stuff was hot, like super hot. And then you got things like Coy Hill coming out, and you've got, you know, all these high proof things that hit the market, and you go, sometimes you drink them and then you look at the label and you're like, you got to be kidding me. That thing's 63%,
right?
You know? And so that perfect proof point for me, I'd say it's bumped up a bit. It's a little bit higher than Bottled in Bond, which, you know, probably you're sitting right here with a 55%. This is probably your sweet spot.
I'm around there. I'm like 107 to 110. That's kind of where I like to.
Yeah, those are great. And that's your Smooth Ambler. That's your Old Scout right there. That 107. I mean, and that's a market. You know, when we were talking with Noel from Old Elk, and they were talking about this new release that's come out there, their double wheat. You know, he's like, well, it's wheated and then it's mixed with wheat. You know, it's 107. It's like, so you know who we're going after, you know?
Right.
It's like,
there's a market here. Yeah.
That's a target. Yeah, that 107 is a target. And I'd say, yeah, those are great. But every now and again, I mean, like you and I, we've both talked about how much we love these Copper and King brandies.
Yes.
You know? And this is 63%. You know, this'll turn a goat blind. And this stuff's amazing. Like, and I've had the 40% brandy from Copper and Kings, and I wouldn't give it to my dog. And it's the same stuff. It's just at that proof, it just boom, it comes through. And so I don't know. And like I was sharing with you, you know, I've got this bottle sitting here of Glenfiddich. This is their 15-year Solera, but I bottled this one myself at the distillery at Glenfiddich, and it's 58.4%. So it's not that 44% you get in the red tube, or they changed the tube now. It's not red anymore. But holy cow, this is the same distillate, the same process, the same barrels, the same environment. This thing is a monster. This thing is incredible, and it's 58%. You know, so for me, higher is always better.
Yeah.
I have not found the bourbon that makes me go, ooh, that's too hot. Because you can always throw a little ice in it. You can always throw a little water in it. You can always doctor it if you need to. But and that's my challenge is to anybody that's in the bourbon, anybody that's watching this now that, you know, is in that lower group. Because I know we come across as proof snobs. You know, it's like, oh, those guys just want high. You know, these are the guys that want all those Buffalo Trace antique collections that are way up there, the hazmat range for all these stuff. You know, it's like, don't write it off.
We did that with our Angels Envy pick that's coming out. Sean and I picked it, and it was funny. I felt like an outcast because I always joked that I was like, I'm the Oakeneden and I'm the Russell's guy. Like that, you know, those are my picks.
Those are the ones you bring to the table, right?
Those are the ones I bring to the table, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm on the Angels Envy one, and they offer like a variety of proof points. I think they offer like a 101, like a 105, a 107, and then like a 110.
They don't go too high, but
it's like,
but they get up there.
Caps out.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're tasting it, Sean and I were going through all the notes and we're going through everything, and so we had them, you know, put it out at every proof, and we tasted them all at one proof, and I think 107 is what did it for us. It's like we tried it at like 105, and compared to the 107, it was like night and day.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
It was the weirdest thing, and I got to take home one of the ones that we didn't care for, the ones we didn't pick, but they gave us these cool little flasks.
Yeah, those things are cool. Those little like copper looking.
Yeah,
it looks like a radiator for a really tiny car.
Right. So this one was 126.9 proof, and it was they're all port wine finished.
That's up there.
Oh, there was one.
They bottle it at that? They're gonna start bottling at higher proof?
No. That's just what they gave it.
That's just a sample.
And then and then we watered them down.
Mm-hmm.
There was one that we had that just smelled like it, because they're all port wine finished.
Mm-hmm.
And there was two that just smelled like it didn't have any port on it at all. And there was one, the one that I think it's this one, the one I just completely didn't care for. Smelled just like straight up like kids Benadryl.
Perfect.
Oh shit! Like I took a sniff of it. I was like, I can't get past this. This is bringing.
Just didn't do it for you.
There's some olfactory and some bad senses from back in the day, and I can't do it anymore. Oh, but anyway, well, Jason, this has been wonderful, my man, and I appreciate.
Yeah, it's a good time
for me. So we're gonna keep this going, and we're gonna have just about every admin on here and just dive into their psyche and what they're into, and you know, and what the future of the group is. But this.